Hello and welcome to a lesson on Christian mysticism. Today we're going to explore one of the more esoteric aspects of the Christian faith and learn about its history, beliefs and practices. Be sure to like this video, subscribe for future content, and join us in the discussion below with any thoughts that come to you while watching. If you feel called to help us spread this work, you can check out our Patreon that will be linked in the description. First, let's define what mysticism is. Mysticism can be defined as the pursuit of direct, intimate experience of God or the divine, often through contemplative prayer or other spiritual practices. In the Christian tradition, mystics aim to have a deep, personal relationship with Jesus Christ and to experience his presence in their daily lives. The history of Christian mysticism can be traced back to the early days of the Church, with prominent mystics such as St. John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Avila, and St. Julian of Norwich. These mystics, through their writings and teachings, have helped shape the mystic tradition within Christianity. Christian mysticism is rooted in the belief that it is possible to experience God directly and intimately, and that this experience can lead to a deeper understanding of God and a closer relationship with Him. Mystics believe that through prayer, contemplation, and other spiritual practices, they can achieve a state of union with God, known as the mystical union. This state is characterized by a deep sense of peace, joy, and love for God. In terms of practices, Christian mystics often engage in contemplative prayer, which is a form of meditation that involves focusing one's mind and heart on God. This can involve repeating a prayer or word, using visualization, or simply letting go of all thoughts and allowing God to fill the mind and heart. Another practice common among mystics is asceticism, or the deliberate practice of self-denial or self-discipline in order to draw closer to God. This can include fasting, giving up material possessions, or engaging in acts of service or charity. It's important to note that mysticism is not meant to replace other aspects of Christian practice, such as liturgical worship or sacraments. Instead, mysticism is seen as complementary to these practices and as a way to deepen one's relationship with God. Remember that if you are liking this content, to leave us a thumbs up and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any of our future releases. Let's take a closer look at the three influential figures in Christian mysticism we mentioned earlier: St. John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Avila, and St. Julian of Norwich. First, let's start with St. John of the Cross. St. John of the Cross was a Spanish mystic and poet who lived in the 16th century. He was a Carmelite monk and is considered one of the greatest Christian mystics of all time. He wrote several works that are considered classics of Spanish literature, including The Ascent of Mount Carmel and The Dark Night of the Soul. These works describe his personal experiences of spiritual transformation and the journey of the soul to union with God. The Ascent of Mount Carmel is a book in which St. John outlines the journey of the soul from its initial attraction to God to the ultimate union with God. The soul is compared to a traveler making their way up a mountain, and the book provides guidance and encouragement for the journey. In the book, St. John emphasizes the importance of detachment from worldly things, the need for humility, and the centrality of prayer in the spiritual life. The Dark Night of the Soul is another of St. John's works and is perhaps his most famous. In this work, he explores the concept of the dark night of the soul, a term he uses to describe the process of purification and transformation that the soul undergoes as it moves closer to God. The dark night is characterized by feelings of emptiness, desolation, and abandonment. But St. John asserts that these experiences are necessary for growth and that they ultimately lead to greater union with God. Both The Ascent of Mount Carmel and The Dark Night of the Soul are considered masterpieces of Christian mystical literature, and they offer valuable insights into the spiritual life for readers of all faith traditions. For those interested in Christian spirituality, these works are a must-read and offer a powerful and transformative perspective on the journey towards union with God. Next, we have St. Teresa of Avila. St. Teresa was a Spanish mystic, writer, and reformer who lived in the 16th century. She was a Carmelite nun and is considered one of the greatest mystics of all time. She wrote several works, including The Interior Castle and The Way of Perfection, which describe her experiences of spiritual transformation and offer guidance for others on the spiritual journey. Saint Teresa was also instrumental in reforming the Carmelite order, establishing a new form of monasticism that emphasized a life of solitude and contemplation. The Interior Castle is a treatise on the spiritual journey of the soul. It is written in the form of a dialogue between the soul and God, and presents a comprehensive picture of the spiritual life. In the work, Saint Teresa likens the soul to a castle with many rooms, each representing a different level of spiritual development. She describes the journey from the outer rooms of the castle, which represent a state of worldly awareness and sin, to the inner rooms, where the soul reaches a state of union with God. The Way of Perfection is a guide for those who want to live a life of devotion and contemplation. It covers topics such as detachment from the world, spiritual discipline, prayer, and the virtues necessary for spiritual growth. This work provides practical advice and instructions for leading a life of spiritual growth and union with God. In both The Interior Castle and The Way of Perfection, Saint Teresa draws on her own experiences of spiritual growth and union with God to provide guidance and encouragement to others. She emphasizes the importance of perseverance and patience in the spiritual journey, and the role of humility, self-awareness, and prayer in achieving spiritual progress. Saint Teresa's works continue to be widely read and admired for their depth, insight, and beauty. Her teachings provide a foundation for understanding the spiritual life and offer guidance for those seeking to grow closer to God. Lastly, we have St. Julian of Norwich. St. Julian was an English mystic who lived in the 14th century. She was an anchorite, meaning she lived as a hermit in a cell attached to a church, and is considered one of the greatest mystics of all time. She's known for her book, Revelations of Divine Love, which describes her mystical experiences and provides insight into the nature of God's love. St. Julian's revelations were unlike any other mystical experiences of her time. Her visions were not simply a manifestation of her imagination, but were instead seen as genuine experiences of the divine. Through her writing, St. Julian sought to help others understand the deep love and compassion of God, and how this love could transform their lives. In Revelations of Divine Love, St. Julian describes her visions of the crucified Christ and the lessons she learned about the nature of love and sacrifice. She also reflects on the power of prayer and the importance of surrendering to God's will. One of the key themes in Revelations of Divine Love is the idea that God's love is unconditional, and that all people, no matter their faults or shortcomings, are worthy of God's love. St. Julian believed that through the experience of God's love, people could find healing, peace, and joy in their lives. St. Julian's works have had a profound impact on the Christian mystical tradition and continue to inspire and comfort people to this day. Whether you're seeking a deeper understanding of the nature of love and the divine, or simply looking for comfort and inspiration, Revelations of Divine Love by St. Julian of Norwich is a must-read for anyone seeking a closer relationship with God. These three figures are revered for their writings, which offer guidance and insight into the spiritual life and the journey of the soul to union with God. While they lived in different times and cultures, their works continue to be studied and revered for their wisdom and spiritual insight. In conclusion, Christian mysticism is a tradition within Christianity that emphasizes direct, intimate experience of God through prayer and contemplation. Its roots can be traced back to the early days of the Church, and its practices include contemplative prayer, asceticism, and the pursuit of the mystical union with God. St. John of the Cross, St. Teresa of Avila, and St. Julian of Norwich are three of the most important figures in Christian mysticism. Their works offer guidance, inspiration, and insight into the spiritual journey, and continue to be relevant and studied today. If you're interested in exploring this aspect of the Christian faith, there are many resources available, including books, websites, and communities of fellow seekers. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the spiritual world. We hope that you found today's lesson informative and inspiring, and that you'll continue to explore the world of Christian mysticism and the works of the great mystics. Make sure to leave us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss any future content. If you feel called to do so, you can check out our Patreon, linked in the description below, to help us in continuing in the production of God's work. Until next time, may God bless you and guide you on your journey.